Love podcasts, hate nonsense. It's the Politics Show podcast. Thanks. Nothing from the gallery.
Nothing from the gallery.
Nothing from the gallery.
Nothing from the guest either.
Nothing from the guest.
Telling.
Who was
gentle clap.
Yeah.
Gentle clap. Okay, yeah.
I
Because
don't
you
want to overstay my
endorse
welcome
it.
at this point. Do you know what I mean?
This is George Hancorn, who is a reporter at ITV.
Yeah.
And you're here to talk to us today about the AFD.
I am, yeah, my specialist subject at this point.
Is it?
Well, I mean, it's kind of getting that way. After spending a week in Germany, following around people who love the AFD and also hate the AFD, I feel like I've become if I was on Mastermind, this is what I would do at this point. So.
It's sort of like, do you know when, do you know that criticism that's always levied at journalists who've done like a year abroad in America? And then they're like an expert on American politics. You did a week in Berlin, and now you are the man.
He doesn't understand the UK. He only gets Berlin. That's it. He's become, so Berlin-centric.
Yeah, you are quite Berlin-coded actually today.
This is kind of the vibe we're going for. I'm still in holiday Berlin mode.
Yeah,
so
if you're listening and you're not watching, he's wearing a full Berghain outfit. He's here in leather.
It's actually quite inappropriate to be walking around London in the morning.
I did get some looks. You know what it was? There was like an outfit in one of the piece of cameras where I'm wearing like a black zippy jumper with like a little hoop and then a long black overcoat. It was very Berghain.
My comment in the office was, "This is so man has just arrived in Berlin."
I've never
like
been before.
Black.
Did you hear that? Sorry to go really off topic. Apparently, Kylie Jenner and Timothée Chalamet were in Berghain over the weekend.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I've heard.
Well, they're really swatting up on their German politics. They know the election's coming. They want to, immerse themselves in what's happening.
And what a place to do it in.
So, George, having been there, you just got back. Why would Kylie Jenner want to vote for the AFD?
Well, I guess based on what people who voting for the AFD would say, if Kylie Jenner had concerns around migration. So migration is the biggest topic. So even if you talk to some of the other parties who are not on the far right, they're still talking about migration. So the AFD are kind of setting the agenda a lot. If you talk to young people who are undecided out in Germany, they talk a lot about, basically feeling like left behind, not being able to buy an apartment. But the interesting thing from being there is whether you vote on the left or you vote on the right, a lot of the things, maybe bar migration, there's a lot of crossover. So it's kind of representing itself in very different ways. So it's quite weird because the same things come up, but people are voting in very different ways.
The sort of the horseshoe of it all.
Exactly.
Horseshoe politics.
Yeah.
Where do you think this has been born out of then? Like how long has the AFD been, popular in Germany?
The AFD were formed in 2013. So in the grand scheme of German politics, they're pretty new. But the thing that they're kind of old hands at is TikTok. So they're the newest part. They're the oldest party on TikTok, but the newest party in Germany. So they've been doing stuff well before the other parties are doing. You kind of compare it to, you look at Reform here, right? Nigel Farage and Reform are so good. They're so slick on TikTok. The other parties, you might see maybe Keir Starmer, he seems a little bit more stilted. AFD is the same sort of way. They kind of talk like, they kind of say how it is, right? And that's where young people are then seeing some of this messaging and then repeating it. Their videos get 3 times more views than any of the other parties combined. Like, that's huge. And you've got someone like Olaf Scholz, who's, been the chancellor for a long time now, but his videos do nowhere near as well. So I think it's TikTok basically is how they're kind of attracting these new young voters. And there are almost 2.5 million young people voting for the first time. And that's kind of what they're trying to get.
Because this is what we were looking at yesterday when we were watching your documentary on ITV, was how they were using, specific sounds on TikTok to make messages travel. Mm-hmm. Do you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I mean, I was more interested in kind of, on the social media aspect of it, how it is there was a point in it where you were talking to one of the comm strategists of the AFD, and he was talking about being the guy, kind of similar to the way Nigel Farage is seen here, the guy that you want to have a pint with, as opposed to a Rishi Sunak or a Kemi Badenoch or a Keir Starmer. And the importance of not being patronising and being digestible in a way, and comparing that against what you're saying, that they've been the oldest party on TikTok, or been on TikTok for the longest out of all the parties. And there's kind of this contrast between how the establishment parties are kind of leaning too much into trends and this kind of thing. And I found it really interesting how you see a lot of similarities here, right? Where Reform kind of do have that strategy of non-patronizing, straight to the point, but also kind of leaning into the meme of everything. Whereas Labour, I mean, you look at that like AI animal thing, you just don't know what the strategy is for online and what they're kind of trying to speak to Gen Z with, you know.
I suppose they're almost not taking themselves too seriously. There's a great example that we looked at, which was Olaf Scholz, so leader of the SDP, not going to be the next chancellor based on the polls. He was on like a rowing machine and he was like warming up and it was like Eye of the Tiger style music. It got like 60k and it was, sorry Olaf, but it was kind of cringe. Like it just didn't really work, for even though that's the sort of thing that they think, oh, this is a great idea, this will be fun. It's kind of not authentic, so it doesn't do well.
There tends to be, I think that some people get rather frustrated when we talk about social media in terms of numbers, because they'll say, well, who really cares what's going on social media? But the opposite is true, right? It's like any form of political campaigning. If you want to bring in a younger voter, you need to speak to them. You need to meet them where they are, and they're on social media. You said earlier that you had quite an extraordinary stat of the number of young people who are coming out to vote or predicted to come out to vote in Germany this election. Do you think that's all been down to social media strategy?
I mean, it's hard to know, but if you look, I mean, just away from TikTok, which is traditionally seen as kind of that platform for that younger demographic, that and Snap maybe, Alice Weidel, the leader of the AfD, has just reached 1 million followers on Twitter, on X. Owned by Elon Musk. Elon Musk is a big supporter. Like, it's not just one, their focus is not just on one certain platform. So they're kind of reaching beyond that. But it just shows that even though they're really trying and this campaign's ramping up, they're still like managing to grow in all these sorts of places. And that brings it in. I mean, I think it probably is down to a lot of that. I think if you like look at where most under 30s are getting their news from, they're going to be getting it on those social platforms where the AfD are just there. Every time you go on there, they're just always there hammering those videos out. So I think it is helping. And
then there's been a rather ineffective campaign to combat their strategy by the other parties.
Yeah, I mean, they just haven't really managed to cut through. Like, their stuff just hasn't worked. They've maybe come to it a little bit too late. The AfD were already, had all these other videos that they've basically just been able to repurpose and do more of. And then these other new parties are coming in, or the more establishment parties, but newer on TikTok, come in and they're like, oh, let's try and get your attention. It just not working.
For the young people that are receptive to the AfD on social media, whether it's X or TikTok or Snapchat, do you see them as, because I guess the thing that they have the luxury of when they have control of the messaging is that they don't need to seem like Nazis. Do you feel like the audience, you've spoken to countless German youth when you were there, do you think that there's a level of the base of the AfD being more anti-establishment than they are far right? Or do you think that like actually the Overton window is shifting in Germany and people are becoming more far right based off of the material conditions there?
I mean, I think ultimately, like it with any of these things, it depends who you ask, right? So a lot of the part of our documentary was kind of just reflecting on some of that history in Germany. So the area where there's huge support, just outside Berlin in the east, Erfurt, Thüringen, right? So that's where the Nazis essentially had their stronghold back in the 30s. So there is obviously parallels to history. Anyone in Germany would accept that. But I guess the kind of trying to be seen as maybe a younger party, bringing in younger people, talking about kind of those like base issues is kind of trying to steer away from that a little bit. And I guess the whole TikTok stuff shows like we're new, we're exciting, and we're something completely different that you've never seen before, even if people would draw those comparisons to history, I guess. You
spoke to this candidate, Martin was his name.
That's Martin,
in Berlin.
Yeah.
And he was a very interesting candidate because he's fighting in a city that you would typically describe as progressive, multicultural, but he seems to think he's got cut through there despite being attacked several times by Antifa during his campaign.
So he was 27. So he was like, in terms of candidates standing to be, MPs or whatever, or politicians in the Bundestag, he's pretty young. And he said, he's had all sorts of things from being out campaigning. The interesting thing that the AfD, the thing that we found, they are essentially or will be the second largest party in Germany. But a lot of the events were quite closed off. So the rally we went to was very closed off. There were like counter protests there, but it was kind of very behind closed doors. Martin, again, out on the street, we were like, let's speak to people. Like, let's, do your campaigning, do your thing. And he was quite reluctant, maybe because of the security and the safety concerns. Maybe that's it. I mean, the thing that he drew on a lot, he liked to mention, was gay voters in Berlin and beyond Germany. So there was a poll that was done while we were in Germany by a dating app in Germany, which basically said around 55-60% of gay men were going to vote for the AfD. And that was kind of jumped on by the AfD. It was in all the newspapers that they were pushing. It was in all their in their TikTok videos. If you then bring up their leader, Alice Weidel, who's a gay woman, they want to talk about it. It's not a thing that they want to reference, it's quite interesting. It kind of felt, it's not what I anticipated that they would, how they would react to that start.
It's almost similar to the American election just gone, where it was leapt on by some Republicans that gay men wanted to vote for Trump. And there was a big gay men for Trump groups, and there were rallies, and it was all about a fiscal economic argument. But I mean, at the base of it, the AfD don't believe in homosexuality. They are pseudo-Christian.
So they would say, I mean, from their policy stuff, it's like traditional family values is their thing, right? That's what they talk about. But you kind of have to question how that works with their leader being gay. She was asked by a reporter recently about her sexuality and about her partner. She completely shut it down, and the video's wild. Like it's in German, but she goes in on this reporter for even bringing this up and mentioning it. So it's kind of something that the AfD, maybe going to have to battle with, especially when you have all these young voters going for them. They're going to be the biggest party amongst Gen Z. It's huge.
Where do you see the similarities between the political landscape in Germany, especially with the context of them becoming the second largest party on Sunday, and I guess the UK, of course, but Europe more widely? Is this kind of, we're at the precipice of a major change in European politics?
I think what happens on Sunday and what happens with the AfD generally going forward is going to be a really good test case for the rest of Europe. So if we look here, I mean, anywhere you go, right? You talk to anyone who is below the age of 30, maybe even below the age of 40, they kind of feel disenfranchised with politics. They feel like they have these strong views, but they don't really know where to make them land. Like, who do you vote for that's going to maybe change things? You then have a party like Reform in the UK that come in and say, we're gonna mix things up, we're gonna shake things up, we're gonna change it. And a lot of young people, whether you're on the left or the right, kind of radical thinkers, right? You probably think, let's do something different, let's try it. So that's the kind of thing I imagine we would see here in the UK come 2029, that next general election. But elsewhere in Europe, I mean, in France, we've kind of seen a little bit of it, not quite played out. You've got the Vox party in Spain, the far-right party there. I think Germany is going to be really interesting. It's more interesting in some ways, given its history, but it's also more interesting because it could be the first time we see this play out properly.
Because the conditions in Germany for young people are quite similar to what we're seeing in Britain. People are facing stagnation, low job prospects, they can't get a house. I mean, particularly where you are in Berlin, I mean, it's almost, it's nearly as out of control as it is here in terms of getting onto the ladder. And what you were saying earlier about the far left's concerns being similar to the far right's and actually their demands being extraordinarily comparable, that's what's happening here as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we were at a Reform conference just a couple of weeks ago, and I was surprised the first time that one young person I spoke to said that he used to be a Corbyn voter. When I got to the fourth or fifth one, I was like, this is getting out of control. Maybe there's a bit of a pattern here. So there is a similarity.
It definitely is. And if you're like trying to, across the board, I guess more people maybe renting is a bit more of a normal thing into your older years in the rest of Europe, maybe than the UK. But if you're trying to get an apartment or you're trying to get a flat, or you get on the housing ladder and it's not happening, and you've been, trying for years and years and years, and the more establishment parties who are older, you've still, like, why would you not give it a go? Why would you not think, okay, I might not align with everything they say, but I've kind of tried everything else. And that's the really interesting thing. It's one guy we spoke to, a guy called Simon, you see in the documentary, who's like a big TikToker in Germany. He's like, I don't even look up AfD stuff, but I'm getting it on my For You page. And essentially they're coming to me as a bit of a middle finger to the rest of the establishment because, I live just outside Berlin. I'm kind of not in that like bubble. So, he completely understands why, although he despises the idea of the AfD, completely understands why his friends might vote that way.
Are they more solid on their policy than Reform are? Because Reform can almost be a little bit of a blank slate that you can project anything you want to onto them. But I mean, especially when it comes to topics like housing. I know Nigel Farage has talked about like the scourge of NIMBYism, but he's also said he doesn't want to build in Kent and Essex.
Yeah.
So he's a bit, he's kind of the everyman. Are the AfD more, are they more consolidated on what their plan is, or are they similar to that?
From my experience and speaking to those young people, it operates with the AfD a lot on sound bites. So you can obviously ask them, they'll talk about remigration, which is this big word of this election, which is kind of being thrown around all over the place. But once you push people on, young people might say, I can't afford this apartment, it's because of immigration. If you then dig into that, and this is just purely based on the people we spoke to at that rally who were between 16 and 20, like they were young.
That is really young.
There was kind of no way to expand on that. They didn't really know. They had those short sound bites that they were seeing in those AfD videos. They were just regurgitating what they'd seen, right, on TikTok and stuff. But they actually didn't know what the solution was or like how that would happen. Oh, we want to send all these people back. How does that happen in reality? Like, and that was the kind of bizarre thing.
Where is the left in all of that? Like, if the concerns of young people in Germany are very material, things like I can't get a house, I can't get a job, and the right's answer is it's his fault, it's her fault. Why don't we see the wind in the sails of the German left? I suppose like Olaf Scholz is from the center-left party, but aside from that, where's the opposition to that?
Well, I mean, the Greens have been in the coalition previously. They've kind of helped prop up a government in Germany, but I just don't think they're getting as much cut through because they're being seen as the more like they've been in the coalition before. They aren't like a brand new emerging party. They're still on the up. They're still growing, but it just isn't quite the same as the AfD. The AfD have just got some magical cut through that the other parties haven't had because they're not the other parties. I think that's the big thing.
Which is interesting because that the Greens not having cut through is playing out everywhere. That seems to be
They had the rush
yeah.
7 to 10 years ago, and now it's kind of just fizzling out a small bit.
Because if you look here, you're essentially looking at the same sort of number of MPs from Green and Reform, but who are you hearing a lot more from?
Yeah.
And who is actually often speaking to young people on stuff like TikTok in it maybe a better way, or like maybe we're just seeing more of it and the Greens are doing absolutely as many videos, but it feels like there's a disparity.
It's not being promoted potentially.
Yeah,
perhaps.
Yeah.
Any more?
No? Predictions
for election?
Yeah.
So I mean, the AfD will come second, but all the other parties will refuse to work with them, so they won't be in that coalition. But they may have to support Merz's party, the CDU, on some sort of votes, maybe around immigration or other issues nearer the time. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see the next election. You could easily see the AfD winning that and leading the German government in the Bundestag.
Really?
Potentially.
That's something to look forward to, isn't it?
It is.
Right, well, George, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
We'll have your piece linked in the bio below. So if you feel like going to watch it,
You should.
You
You
should.
absolutely should. It's a fantastic piece.